My name is Lauren Spencer, and this is for AP Statistics at Reagan High School. And want to go over what we talked about in class yesterday, introduction to statistics. So we gave a brief introduction. Those notes can be found on page 1 through 3 of your note spiral. Please make sure you read those in detail because I'm going to gloss that here because most of this is just background information that you can read. And there's no reason for me to spend a whole lot of time or bore you with a long video when you can read the material just as easily as I can go over it. So first off is pages 1 through 3 of your note spiral, and we provide a definition of a definition for statistics in this, and I'm going to go ahead and share screen so that you can go ahead and see that. At least I hope that's what's going to happen. So we go to share. And when I share the screen, we see at the top of this page, and I believe this is page 2, statistics is a study of how to collect, organize, display, describe, and analyze data from a sample in order to make generalizations about a population. That's a whole lot of definitions in there, all right? And we are going to break this down really briefly. Basically, the very first thing you need to do is collect the data. Then you're going to need to organize it by displaying and describing it. And organizing it means tables, graphs, etc. Describing it is going to be, hey, what shape does it have? How far is the data spread out? And then things that you already know, like the average and the median, etc. Once we do that, we figure out the probability that that data would have occurred. And then from there, we make generalizations about the population. So that brings us to a couple words that we need to talk about. Population is the group of interest, all right? It is whatever we're interested in. So let's just say I wanted to know the proportion of people who are going to support Joe Biden or Donald Trump. That proportion via the population of U.S. voters. So my population would be U.S. voters. And then the measurement or that proportion would be a parameter. So please remember, populations, the measure of interest is known as a parameter. So you have a population and a parameter. All right, so parameters are the measurement of a population. Now, one of the things that we often do is go, hey, why don't we just survey everybody or talk to everybody? And that's called a census. And that's great when we can do that. Matter of fact, this class is not necessary if you can perform a census. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do, very expensive, and rarely can ever really capture a true census for a large population. For small populations, it might be very likely, but for a large population like the United States, probably not going to be able to happen. So consequently, we have to collect the data in a different method, and that method is known as the sample. Now, a sample is just a small group of the population. So if the population of US voters was 300 million, our sample might be 3,000 voters or 2,000 voters or 5,000 voters, but some subset, some smaller group would be the sample. And then I go, hey, what proportion of that sample supported Donald Trump or supported Joe Biden? That proportion that came from the sample is known as the statistic. So statistics come from the sample. They both start with an S, and they're the measurement of interest. The parameter comes from the population, and it's the measurement of interest. So basically, parameter is to population as statistic is to sample. So you need to know population, parameter. You also need to know sample and statistic. And then you need to know the word census, which is a survey of everybody, and you also need to know why that's not very easy to conduct. The last couple things that I want to talk to you about is a good sample. Not that we're going to go into detail now, we'll go into much greater detail later, but a sample, to be a good sample, it needs to mirror the population. It needs to look like the population. So if I wanted to survey the students at Reagan, that means I'm going to have some females. That means I'm going to have some males. I'm going to have some freshmen and some sophomores and some juniors and some seniors to make sure that every element of the population has some proportional representation. It's kind of like the U.S. Congress, all right? we make sure that every element or every state has some sort of representation. So a good sample represents the population. It's just a smaller microcosm. It's a small group of that. We'll talk more about that at a later time. A couple things to say. The note spiral is taught in the order, or is presented in the order of collecting, displaying and describing probability, followed by making decisions. However, due to COVID and some changes, we're going to start off by displaying and describing first, which means we're kind of go in bouncing around a bit, and I'm sorry about that because the pages don't match up that as easily, but we will make sure that we'll cover every page, and should be a good year. Thank you for joining the class.